Hey everyone, welcome to the Chilling Hour, where the stories never let you sleep. My name is Daniel Rourke. I'm 41 years old, and I'm telling this because I can't carry it alone anymore. I've driven freight across the US for over a decade, spent more nights in rest stops and RV parks than in my own bed, and I've seen my share of strange things on the road. But nothing has stayed with me the way this did. I wasn't always a trucker. Back in 2013, before I moved full-time to long-haul driving, I lived in a beat-up old RV I bought secondhand. It was meant to help me save money while I rebuilt my life after a rough divorce. I traveled between seasonal jobs, construction, campground maintenance, whatever I could find. That year, while working in northern Utah, I stayed at a remote little RV camp at the base of the Sloan Ridge Mountains. The place was called Ridge Pine Camp, though locals called it Ridge Spine. At the time, I thought it was just a silly nickname. Now I understand there was a reason they said it like that. When I arrived, it was early September. The air was cold enough to sting, the mountains already dusted with the first thin layer of snow. The campground sat beside a narrow lake so dark it looked bottomless. There were maybe 6 other RVs, all long-term campers. Retirees, nomads, hunters. The camp host, a soft-spoken guy named Grant, handed me a map, circled a spot near the far end, and told me something that seemed like a joke. "If you hear knocking in the woods," he said with a weird half-smile, "don't go answering it. Folks out here like to mess with newcomers." I laughed politely, but he didn't. His face didn't change at all. That unsettled me more than his words. My assigned spot, Site 14, was farther from the others than I expected. It was right on the tree line. Tall, spindly pines crowded together like an army standing shoulder to shoulder. Their branches bent downward, heavy with early frost, and the shade beneath them was so dark it looked like night even at noon. The first evening was calm, cold, quiet, almost too quiet. Only the occasional creak from someone's RV settling in the cold air. I cooked, read a book, and fell asleep early. But around 1:47 a.m., I woke to the sound of knocking. Not at my door, out in the trees. 3 taps, slow, hollow, like knuckles on wood. I sat up in bed, disoriented. The sound echoed again. Knock, knock, knock. I told myself it was someone chopping firewood late at night, or maybe an animal knocking something over. But then I heard it again, slower this time, deliberate, like whoever, whatever, was doing it wanted me to listen. My heart pounded. I sat in the darkness of the RV, staring toward the window blinds. I didn't want to lift them, didn't want to see anything staring back. The knocking went on for nearly 15 minutes. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was even worse. By morning, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe ice falling from a tree, maybe a woodpecker. And the fear faded, the way fear usually does in daylight. The second night, everything changed. I'd spent the day working at a nearby construction site and came back exhausted. By 10, I was out cold. But around 2:30 a.m., a new sound jolted me awake. Someone was walking around my RV. Snow and frost compressed under heavy footsteps, circling slowly, methodically. I reached toward the window but stopped myself. I was terrified that if I lifted the blinds, I'd see a face staring back. A human face would have been bad enough, but deep down, I was afraid it wouldn't be human at all. I held still, barely breathing. The footsteps paused right by the door. Then came that knocking again. 3 taps, soft this time, measured. I didn't move. The footsteps shifted again, this time walking toward the back of the RV. I could hear each crunch of snow, slow, patient. Then, from directly behind my bedroom wall, I heard whispering. A low voice, too low for me to make out the words, but close enough that it sounded like it was just on the other side of the wall. I reached for my phone to call someone, anyone, but I had no service. That wasn't unusual for the area, but it made my panic worse. The whispering stopped abruptly. And for a moment, there was only silence. Then something scraped along the metal siding of the RV. A long, dragging sound like nails or claws being pulled across it. I finally yelled, "Who's out there?" The scraping stopped. Then came a voice from the woods, soft and distant. It sounded like a man. "Let me in." My blood turned to ice. I backed away from the wall, knocked over a lamp, and grabbed the small hatchet I kept by the door. I didn't sleep at all the rest of the night. In the morning, I walked around the RV looking for footprints. The frost was disturbed in several long, looping trails, like someone had walked circles around my vehicle. But the weirdest part was the back panel. The frost had been wiped off in long vertical lines, like fingers had scraped the metal clean. I asked Grant about it. He just stiffened, then told me I should move to a different site closer to the entrance. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't joke about pranksters this time. He simply handed me keys to the bathhouse and said, "Stay near people tonight." So I moved to Site 4, right across from a retired couple in a fifth-wheel trailer. I felt safer knowing others were close by. But safety didn't last long. That night, I fell asleep early, thinking exhaustion might overwhelm the anxiety. But around 3:02 a.m., I woke again, this time to something far worse. The knocking came from inside the RV. It sounded like someone was tapping the cabinets above my bed. Slow, rhythmic, like a calm, patient signal. Knock, knock, knock. My entire body froze. I couldn't even swallow. I stared at the cabinets, expecting them to burst open. Then the knocking moved, traveling along the cabinets, down the wall toward the front of the RV. Something was inside the walls. I slid out of bed, grabbed the hatchet, and backed into the small kitchen area, trying to control my breathing. The knocking stopped again. Then I heard it whisper from somewhere above the bathroom vent. This time, the words were clear. "Daniel, open up." Hearing my own name broke something inside me. I bolted out the door barefoot, running straight into the icy dirt, yelling for help. The retired couple flung their door open, startled. When I told them someone was in my RV, the old man grabbed a flashlight and followed me back. But when he searched the inside, checking cabinets, the shower, the storage bays, there was no one there. Nothing touched. Nothing moved. But every cabinet door on the right side of the RV was hanging slightly open. By morning, I made up my mind. I told Grant I was leaving Ridgepine Camp immediately. He didn't look surprised at all. Before I left, he pulled me aside. "There's been stories about this place since before my time," he said quietly. "When the lake was lower in the 60s, they found cabins, old logging shacks, buried under the waterline. Whole families lived and died out here. Some say the woods don't like to be empty." I didn't ask for details. I didn't want them. I drove out of that campground faster than my old RV had ever gone. I didn't stop until I was 6 hours away, parked behind a diner in Colorado. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. But the story doesn't end there, because 2 nights later, while camped behind that diner, I woke at 3 a.m. to a sound I will never forget. 3 knocks. Soft, patient, right against the back of my RV. I nearly vomited from fear. I didn't open the door, didn't move. I sat trembling until sunrise. When I finally stepped outside, the frost behind the RV was disturbed again. 3 long lines dragged slowly down the metal. I got rid of that RV a week later. But even now, 10 years later, when I'm parked in rest stops across the country, sometimes, if the night is cold enough, if the wind is too still, I still hear it. Knock, 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 and I swear, sometimes the whisper follows. "Daniel, open up." Story the end.
Story number 2.
My name is Daniel Harper, and I'm 41 years old. What I'm about to tell you is not a legend, not a campfire fabrication, and not a nightmare spun out of stress or imagination. This is something that happened to me in the fall of 2019, in a remote part of Wyoming, during what was supposed to be a peaceful solo RV camping trip. I've held on to this story for years because every time I've tried to talk about it, my throat locks up, my mind races, and a cold pressure settles on my neck like unseen fingers. But I need to talk about it now, because something tells me the more I stay silent, the closer it gets. I was traveling through the West after quitting my job, burnt out, exhausted, craving open skies and empty roads. For weeks, I hopped from campground to campground with my old Winnebago, feeling more alive than I had in years. Then I made the mistake of staying at Hollow Creek RV grounds. The name alone should have clued me in, but the place looked perfect on the surface. A clearing surrounded by towering lodgepole pines, a small stream running nearby, and only 2 other RVs when I arrived. Quiet, secluded, peaceful, or so it seemed. I chose a spot near the back of the grounds, where the forest pressed close and the air smelled like pine sap in early winter. I set up camp, grilled dinner, and sat outside watching the stars. For the first time in a while, I felt calm. But calm is deceptive. Calm is the breath drawn before the scream. It started around 11:45 p.m. I had settled into bed, the RV gently rocking in the light breeze, when I heard what sounded like someone walking around outside. At first, it was distant, moving between the trees, twigs snapping softly, footsteps crunching leaves in slow, deliberate rhythm. I thought maybe it was a deer, but then the steps grew heavier, more human. I held still and listened. The footsteps circled the RV once, twice, slower the second time, like whoever or whatever was out there was studying the shape of the vehicle, memorizing it. Then came the breathing, right outside the door. A low, raspy inhale, a wet, rattling exhale, a sound that reminded me of someone whose lungs were filling with water. I froze. My heartbeat thudded so hard it hurt. I lay in my bed, unable to move, unable to even swallow. There was no mistaking it. Someone was standing inches away from me, separated only by a thin aluminum door. After a moment, the breathing stopped. Then a quiet voice, a man's voice, strained and hoarse, spoke from the other side of the door. "Is anyone inside?" That question was not curious. It wasn't panicked. It was hungry. Slow. Testing the words like he hadn't used them in a long time. I didn't answer. I didn't move. The voice came again, this time closer to the window by my bed. "I see you." That's when the window tapped. One slow tap, then another, then 3 in a row. Tap, tap, tap. I shot upright in bed, almost screaming. My breath caught in my throat. I whispered, "Go away," even though I knew whispering wouldn't accomplish anything. Everything went dead silent. Then a scraping sound, like nails dragging down the metal side of the RV, moved from the back wheel well all the way toward the front. My entire body tightened. The scraping stopped, but something pressed against the sidewall. It bowed inward slightly, like a palm pushing from the outside. Then the whisper came again, this time inches from my ear through the glass. "Let me in." I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. No service. I wasn't surprised. Remote Wyoming. Of course there was no signal. I sat awake until dawn, clutching a kitchen knife and praying for daylight. When the sun rose, everything was quiet. I peered outside slowly. There were footprints in the dirt. Bare, human, deep, and they circled my RV at least 5 times. They were larger than normal. Too large. And the gate was strange. The steps dragged slightly, like whoever made them wasn't lifting their feet fully. I noticed something else. The other campers were gone. Their RVs, gone, as if they had packed up in the middle of the night and fled. Only my RV remained. That should have been enough to make me leave immediately. But exhaustion won. I convinced myself it must have been some deranged vagrant, maybe someone high, someone desperate. And the footprint size? Trick of the dirt. That's what I kept telling myself. I spent the day shaking, unable to enjoy the woods, constantly looking over my shoulder. I planned to leave first thing the next morning, but I didn't make it through the night. Around 9 p.m., I built a small fire outside to keep my nerves steady. Fire has a way of making you feel safe, even when you shouldn't. As I sat there, an icy wind drifted through the pines, colder than the night should have allowed. The flames flickered, dimmed, and that's when I saw it. Across the dark clearing, beyond the reach of my firelight, stood a tall shape, unmoving, watching. At first, I thought it was a tree stump, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized I could see the faint outline of arms hanging unnaturally long at its sides. Then the head tilted. Too far. Much too far. My stomach dropped. I stood up, slowly backing toward the RV without taking my eyes off the figure. It didn't move, didn't even sway. It was as still as a silhouette cut from black paper. When I finally reached the RV door and fumbled with the lock, the figure vanished. One blink. It was gone. I scrambled inside, locked the door, yanked down the blinds, and sat on the floor trying to catch my breath. That's when the scratching started. Soft at first, like a mouse inside the wall. Then louder, more insistent, coming from the roof, then from the back wall, then from the door. Scritch, scritch, scritch! Something was circling the RV again, dragging its nails across every surface as it passed. Let me in. The voice was everywhere at once, above me, behind me, beside the window, like it wrapped around the RV, whispering through the seams. Let me in. I grabbed the keys. I didn't care about gear or hookups or anything. I just had to get out. The engine sputtered at first. My heart nearly stopped. Then it roared to life. I floored it. As I barreled down the gravel road, the forest whipping past in blurred black lines, I felt something heavy slam onto the roof. The RV swayed violently. I screamed and fought to control the wheel. The weight on the roof crawled forward, slowly, deliberately, until it was right above the windshield. I didn't look. I couldn't. All I heard was that rasping breath filling the cabin from above. I hit the main road doing nearly 70. The moment the tires hit pavement, the weight on the roof vanished. I kept driving for 3 hours, without stopping, without looking back. It wasn't until sunrise, when I finally pulled into a crowded gas station, trembling from shock, that I dared step out and inspect the roof. Deep grooves, finger length, ran from the back all the way to the front, stopping just above the windshield. They weren't made by an animal. They were too long, too thin, too uniform. And in the dust on the hood was a handprint, larger than any handprint I'd ever seen. Too large to be human. I sold the RV the next week, told the buyer it had roof damage from a tree branch. I didn't care if they believed me or not, just wanted it gone. For months after, I didn't go near wooded areas, couldn't camp, couldn't even look at tall pines without feeling sick. But the worst part isn't what happened out there, it's what followed me home. Every night, around 11:45 p.m., the same time I first heard footsteps at Hollow Creek, I hear tapping on the walls of my house. Slow, gentle, patient, tap, 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 and sometimes when the tapping stops, a voice murmurs through the vents of my bedroom. Let me in. I don't know how long it will wait. I don't know if keeping silent made it stronger. I don't know if telling this story will bring it back tonight. But if you ever hear tapping on your RV walls or your house windows when you're alone in the dark, don't answer, don't look, don't speak. Because whatever is out there, it's not wandering, it's hunting, and it does not forget. Story, the end.
Story number 3.
My name is Laura Whitman, and I was 41 years old when this happened. People tell me that time heals all wounds, but they've never spent a night in a place that erases time altogether, where the dark feels older than anything human, and the silence feels like it's listening to you breathe. I still can't close my eyes without seeing that campground, without hearing the sounds that should never exist in nature. I was on a cross-country RV trip with my younger brother, Adam, age 33. We weren't thrill seekers or ghost hunters. We were just trying to heal a part of our lives we had lost when our mom passed earlier that year. She used to love camping, really simple old-fashioned camping, and we wanted to revisit some of the places she took us when we were kids. But the campground where everything went wrong, that wasn't one of her places. That place found us. We had been driving through Arizona, somewhere between Holbrook and Winslow, when our GPS went out. Not lost, not recalculating, just gone. Blank screen. The sky was overcast even though the weather said clear. The road stretched empty for miles. Then we saw the sign, a wooden board, half rotten, propped up on 2 leaning posts. Cedar Wash Campground, open, RV sites available, family friendly. It wasn't on any map Adam checked. It looked abandoned, forgotten. But the truth was, we were tired, and the nearest town was still an hour away. So we turned in. I wish we hadn't. The road wound deep through twisted cedar trees, branches like crooked fingers. The air grew colder the farther we drove, as if the sunlight couldn't reach here. After maybe half a mile, we passed a small shack-like building with a faded sign that said office, but nobody was inside. No lights, no bell, just a clipboard with blank sheets of paper and a rusted pen that didn't write. A small metal box hung on the wall, dented and scorched around the edges. A note on top said, "Put cash here. Pick any site. Do not stay outside after dark." We both stared at that last line. It didn't feel like a rule. It felt like a warning. But Adam shrugged and said, "We'll just stay the night. I'm exhausted." So we left money in the box, ridiculously cheap price, only $15, and drove further in. Cedar Wash wasn't big, maybe 12 or 13 RV lots arranged in a rough loop. 3 of them had vehicles already parked, old, dusty, like they hadn't been moved in years. Nobody was outside, no voices, no kids playing, no lights. It felt like a graveyard for campers. We parked at Site 8. The first thing that bothered me was the quiet, not just the absence of people. There were no birds, no insects, no wind rustling the cedars. I felt like we'd stepped into a vacuum. Adam, being Adam, brushed it off and grabbed a couple beers from the fridge. "Relax," he said. "Worst case scenario, it's just some weird backwoods place with no staff." Still, there was something wrong with the air. It felt heavy, suffocating, the kind of quiet that makes your heartbeat sound loud. That night, everything fell apart. It started around 10 p.m. Adam was asleep on the convertible sofa, and I was reading near the window. The campground sat in complete darkness, except for our single porch light. The cedars cast long shadows that looked like thin figures reaching across the ground. Then I heard footsteps outside. Slow, dragging footsteps circling the RV. My breath caught in my throat. I leaned slightly toward the window, but the curtain shifted on its own, as if someone was gliding a finger along the fabric from the other side. Then I heard whispering. Impossible whispering. Voices too thin, too layered, like breath passing through dried leaves. I shook Adam awake. He sat up groggy, annoyed. Seriously? Probably just some animal. No animal whispers your name, I whispered back. He froze, because the sound outside, faint but distinct, was saying, "La!" drawing out the syllables like a chant. Adam grabbed a flashlight and moved to the door. I tried to stop him, but he shook me off. When he swung the door open, the light flickered and then went entirely black. We both stared into the dark that seemed too thick, too absolute. Like it wasn't night at all, it was something else swallowing everything. Then the cedars began to move, not swaying with wind, bending, leaning in toward us, as if listening. Adam whispered, "Get inside, now." We slammed the door shut and locked it. That's when we realized the other RVs were no longer where they had been. Every single one had shifted. Not driven, shifted, repositioned like someone had picked them up and moved them closer. They now formed a tight ring around us. Lights off, windows dark, doors open, waiting. We shut all the blinds and turned every lock we had. The interior lights flickered, and then half of them went out. The air grew cold enough to see our breath. My skin prickled like something unseen was brushing past me. Then came the tapping, from the roof, slow, rhythmic, deliberate. Tap, tap, Adam whispered. "What is that?" But I already knew. Something was crawling on top of the RV. We both stared upward, unable to move. The tapping turned into dragging. Something sliding across the metal roof, slow, heavy, claws or nails scraping. Then it stopped directly above us and breathed. A long, ragged inhale that made the ceiling vibrate. Adam mouthed, "Don't make a sound." But the thing above us spoke again in that thin, unnatural voice. "Lara, let me in." The windows shook violently, rattling as if something was pushing its face against the glass. Shapes moved outside, more than one, tall, jerking silhouettes moving between the cedars. Something scratched at the side of the RV, long grooves cut into the metal like a knife dragging with too much force. And then, a small voice, a little girl's voice, whispering from the back window. "Help me, please, it's so dark, let me inside." Adam shouted, "Do not open anything." But my instincts fought against me. The voice was perfect, too perfect, terrified, innocent. But Adam grabbed my wrist before I could move. "That's not a kid," he said. "You heard the others." I started to cry quietly. The voices multiplied. Adults, children, old, young, whispering, pleading, calling us by name even though we'd told no one who we were. "Adam, Laura, cold, come outside, join us, let us in." The RV began to rock, swaying violently back and forth. The roof groaned under the weight of whatever was crawling across it. Then we heard something worse, knocking from inside the cabinets, knocking from under the floor, knocking from the bathroom, like they weren't just outside, like they were already in the walls. Adam grabbed his keys. "We're leaving. Now. I don't care what's outside. We're driving through it." I nodded, shaking. He threw open the driver's curtain and stopped breathing. So did I, because standing inches from the windshield was a face. Not human. Too pale, too stretched. Eyes dark like burned-out holes. Mouth hanging open as if unhinged. Skin cracked like the bark of the cedars. It pressed its forehead against the glass, tilting its head in jerking motions, studying him. Then it smiled. If you could call that shape a smile. Adam cursed and started the engine. The RV roared to life. The figure's face stayed against the window, unmoving, its black eyes following him. He hit the gas so hard the wheels spun in the dirt. The faces outside, dozens now, turned toward the noise. We plowed forward. One of the parked RVs toppled as we smashed past it. But the others did not move. They stood firmly in place, as if rooted to the ground. The figures in the trees scrambled toward us, too fast, too distorted. Some crawled on all fours, some twisted their limbs at unnatural angles. The RV burst out of the loop just as something slammed into the back window, shattering it. I screamed, but didn't look back. Adam kept driving, swerving violently through the narrow dirt road. Trees whipped past us. Shadows ran alongside the RV, pounding on the walls. Then we passed the office shack, and everything went silent. No footsteps, no whispers, no scratching, just silence. The instant we crossed the boundary of the campground, the world felt normal again. Night, air, stars, crickets. But when I looked back in the side mirror, the entrance we'd just driven through was gone, replaced by dense forest. No signs, no road, no campground. As if Cedar Wash had never existed. We drove until sunrise, too scared to stop. Adam dropped me off at my house 2 days later, promising we'd talk about it when we were calmer. But we never did, because Adam disappeared 3 weeks later. They found his RV abandoned on a dirt road in Nevada, but they never found him. And on the side of his RV, carved deep into the metal like claw marks, were the words, "Let me in, Laura." Sometimes late at night, I hear knocking on my windows, soft, polite, patient, and a thin voice whispering from the dark, "Laura, it's so cold out here. Let me in." Story the end.
Story number 4.
My name is Evan Mercer. I'm 34 years old, and I've told almost no one this story, mostly because I don't think anyone would believe it, and partly because speaking it aloud makes me feel like I'm calling it back. But I can't sleep tonight. I'm parked behind a truck stop on the outskirts of Nevada, and the silence is too much, so maybe telling you will give me a little peace. It happened last fall, somewhere just outside Flagstaff, Arizona. I had taken a week off to decompress after a long year. My father left me his old '89 Winnebago, the same RV he used to take us camping in when I was a kid. I thought the nostalgia might be therapeutic. I thought some quiet would help. I thought sleeping under the pines would remind me of him. Looking back, that's the last time my memories feel warm. I arrived at the Hollow Creek RV campground around sunset. It was off-season, so only a few long-term campers were there, mostly retirees who nodded politely but didn't show much interest in talking. The camp host was an older woman named Ruth, whose skin had the sun-leathered look of someone who'd lived outdoors most of her life. She handed me a site map, circled my assigned spot, and told me to avoid the north trail after dark. When I asked why, she just said, "Old ground up there. Doesn't settle right at night." I thought she meant the trail was uneven and easy to trip on. I wish that's all it had been. My RV was parked at Site 23, close enough to the woods that when the wind blew, I could hear the branches tapping against the roof like bony fingers. But the place seemed peaceful. The sky had turned that glowing blue-purple before real darkness takes over, and the cold air smelled like pine, damp earth, and, somehow, stillness. I made dinner, watched a little TV, and by 11, I killed the lights. Outside, the entire campground went dead silent. No conversation, no music, not even the usual clatter of an RV door or someone walking a dog. It was unsettling, but I reminded myself people here were older and probably asleep early. Around 12:30 a.m., I woke to the sound of crunching leaves outside my window. Slow, deliberate steps. At first, I figured it was a deer or maybe a raccoon. The footsteps circled the RV once, then again, then a third time. That's when I realized something was wrong. Deer don't circle. Predators don't circle either. They stalk, they pounce, but they don't pace around a camper like they're tracing its outline. Then came the whispering. It was faint. So faint, I thought it was the wind moving through branches. But the voice wasn't random. It had shape, rhythm, words. I pressed my ear to the window screen. In the walls? He's still in the walls. My skin prickled. The whisper was right outside my window, inches from me. I forced myself to look. But instead of a person, all I saw was absolute darkness. No shadow, no shape, just the soft sway of trees. The whisper stopped. And then someone knocked. 3 taps, light, gentle, like they didn't want to be heard, but wanted me to know they were there. I almost yelled for help, but something froze the sound in my throat. Every hair on my neck rose at the exact same moment. My body reacted before my brain understood why. The knocks had come from high up, near the roof, too high for any human to reach without a ladder. I stayed awake until the sky brightened. At the camp store that morning, I asked Ruth if anyone had reported strange noises during the night. She didn't answer immediately. She just stared at me with an expression that made my stomach drop. Finally, she said, "Site 23 is close to the Old North boundary. Been quiet for a while, but maybe you'll want a different spot." I wanted to ask why, but she already had the keys to a new site in her hand. The gesture felt less like an offer and more like a warning. I should have left the campground entirely. But my ego got in the way. I didn't want to seem scared. So I took her offer, moved the RV to Site 7, far from the woods, and convinced myself the footsteps were just an animal. The whispering, I wrote off as dream confusion. The second night made that impossible. I tried to relax that evening. Took a walk, cooked on the portable grill, watched the stars. Site 7 felt safer, more open, no trees brushing against the roof, no shadows lurking behind every pine trunk. By midnight, I was asleep. But at 1:14 a.m., I woke to knocking again. This time it was on the front door. More forceful, less patient. Knock, knock. I froze in bed. My RV had a small entry window above the door, just a narrow strip of glass. As the knocking continued, something blocked out the moonlight through that window. A shape, a head, too tall. My lungs locked. I whispered to myself, it's a prank. Someone's joking. But the campground had been nearly empty, and the retirees I'd seen didn't seem like the prankster type. After a full minute of knocking, the doorknob began to turn. Slow, careful, testing. That snapped me out of paralysis. I grabbed my flashlight, flicked it on, and shone it toward the door. The instant light hit the window, the knocking stopped. The shadow slid out of view in a way that didn't look like someone stepping away. It looked like someone flattening, melting into the dark. I swear to God, that's what it looked like. I waited until sunrise again. Didn't sleep. Didn't even blink for long stretches. At 8 a.m., I marched back to the camp store. Only Ruth wasn't inside. A man with a gray beard and a red flannel shirt was sweeping behind the counter. "Morning," he said. "Looking for something?" I asked where Ruth was. He frowned. "You mean Mrs. Talbot? She passed in July." I stared at him, confused. "No, I talked to her yesterday." He shook his head slowly. "Friend, I think you've got the wrong person. The last host we had before I took over was Mrs. Talbot. She died of a stroke, right here in the store." I tried to protest, but the words dried up when he pointed to a framed photo behind him. It was her. The same woman who'd handed me my site map the day before. I didn't check out, didn't ask for a refund. I ran, literally ran, to my RV, fired up the engine, and tore out of Hollow Creek like something was chasing me. And I swear, right as I passed the wooden entrance sign, I heard footsteps running after me, keeping pace with the RV for too long. Much too long. For the next few nights, I slept in Walmart parking lots. The footsteps didn't follow me. The knocking didn't return, but I kept waking up at random hours convinced someone was standing outside the window. I still get that feeling sometimes. Like right now. Outside this truck stop diner, the wind is completely still. The night is quiet again. Too quiet. And behind my RV, I thought I heard something tapping on the bumper just a moment ago. 3 taps. Soft. Patient. Familiar. I'm not gonna look. I'm gonna drive until the sun comes up, just like before. Maybe I'm running from nothing. Maybe it's all in my head. But if you ever find yourself near Hollow Creek and someone warns you about the North Trail, listen. Don't ignore it the way I did. Don't stay there alone. And if you ever hear knocking on your RV door at night, especially those 3 soft, careful taps, don't open it. Don't answer. Don't even breathe loudly. Because whatever I heard, whatever walked around my camper, whatever whispered through the walls, it wasn't human. Story the end.
Story number 5.
My name is Evan Mercer, and I'm 34 years old. What I'm about to tell you is not a campfire tale. Not something I heard from a friend of a friend, and not some exaggerated urban legend. This happened to me. Every breathless moment, every freezing second of it. And I'm only here to tell you because I got out alive. But I swear on everything holy that something followed me out of that campground. And some nights, I still hear it. It began when I decided to take a solo RV trip across the Midwest after my divorce. I needed quiet, space, something different from the choking air of my apartment. I picked a place called Long Pines RV Camp in northern Minnesota. Small, cheap, with good reviews. Folks said it was peaceful, secluded but safe. That's what I thought I wanted. Peace. Silence. But silence can hide things. Silence can trick you into thinking you're alone when you're not. I arrived just after sunset. The camp was surrounded by dense pines that swallowed the last of the daylight. Only a few RVs were scattered around, maybe 3 total, far apart from each other. The place looked deserted, but everything was clean, organized, with a small office building at the entrance. The ranger wasn't there when I pulled in, just a sign that read, "Check in after hours. Take an open spot. Pay in morning." I didn't think much of it. I parked on the far west end, where the trees were thicker and the fire pit already had leftover ash. After setting up, I grilled some food and sat outside, letting the cold, pine-scented air sting my lungs. It felt good for the first time in months. But around 11 p.m., something strange happened. I heard footsteps, not walking through leaves or sticks, not heavy boots on gravel. They sounded like bare feet slapping lightly against the dirt behind my RV. I froze. The fire crackled. My breath puffed out in soft clouds. I didn't turn around for a full minute. My mind raced. Another camper? A ranger? A lost kid? But what kind of kid walks barefoot alone in near-freezing weather? When I finally turned, I saw nothing, just darkness between the tall pines. Still, the footsteps had been clear, unmistakable. I brushed it off as paranoia, maybe an animal, though it sure hadn't sounded like one. I put out the fire and went inside, locked the RV door, closed the blinds. I tried to sleep. Around 2:30 a.m., something tapped on my RV window. A single, slow tap, then another, then 3 in a row. Tap, tap, tap. I shot awake so fast I nearly fell off the bed. I held my breath, listening. The tapping kept going, moving from one window to the next, circling the RV slowly. Tap, tap, tap. Finally, it reached the window right beside my bed. I swear to God, it sounded like a fingernail dragging slowly across the glass. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I felt like a child hiding under blankets. After about a minute, the tapping stopped. I gathered the courage to peek through the blinds. There was no one, no animal, nothing. Just the forest. But what terrified me wasn't what I saw, it was what I heard while looking out. A whisper, so faint it could have been the wind. It said, "Let me in." I slammed the blinds shut and sat back against the wall, shaking. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When the first gray light of dawn appeared, I went straight to the camp office, desperate for some explanation. The ranger was there. Old guy, maybe in his 70s, with sunken cheeks and skin like wrinkled leather. When I told him what I heard, he didn't laugh. He didn't act surprised. He just stared at me with tired eyes and said, "You were camped on the west side, weren't you?" I nodded. He shook his head slowly. "Should have taken a spot near the center. Folks always think they want quiet, but the West Woods, they're not quiet." His voice was low, calm, but there was something weighed down in it. Something heavy. "Look," I said, trying not to sound insane, "I heard someone walking last night, and tapping on my windows, and whispering." The ranger sighed. "You heard it. The wanderer." At first, I thought he meant an animal or some local nickname for a bear, but he continued. "Back in the 70s, a man stayed here in an RV just like yours. Kept to himself. Quiet fella. One night, he walked into those woods without shoes, without a flashlight, without anything. They found him miles away, frozen stiff. No signs of struggle, except his feet were torn up from walking. Some say he sleepwalked until he died. Others say something called him out." I swallowed hard. "And you're telling me his ghost is wandering around campsites?" "I'm telling you, he never rests. He walks at night, taps on windows, asks to be let in. If you open that door, he leads you into the trees, and you don't come back." I stared at the ranger, waiting for him to crack a smile or chuckle or something to show it was a cruel joke. But he didn't. Instead, he said, "Pack up. Leave before dark. Tonight, it'll try harder." Unease turned into fear. I didn't argue. I went back to my RV and started packing immediately. The sun wasn't even fully up yet, but I didn't care. While cleaning up the fire pit area, I froze. There were footprints on the ground, bare, human, adult-sized, 50 feet away from any other campsite. The edges were deep, as if someone had been standing there watching the RV, and the footprints were pointed directly toward my window. I backed away quickly, got inside, locked the door, and started the engine. But as I was pulling out of the camp, heading down the gravel road toward the main highway, I saw something in my rearview mirror. A man, or what looked like one, standing barefoot at the tree line. He was tall, thin, wearing tattered clothes that looked decades old. But his skin looked gray, stretched too tight across his bones. His head tilted slightly, like he was trying to listen to something far away. And I swear his eyes were white, with no pupils. Even though my windows were closed, I heard it again, his voice. "Let me in." The whisper echoed inside my head like he was sitting right behind me. I slammed the gas pedal and didn't stop driving until I hit the interstate. I never went back to Long Pines. I never took another solo RV trip. I barely sleep with my blinds open anymore. And for months after, every night around 2:30 a.m., I'd hear tapping on the windows of my apartment. Always soft, always patient, I ended up moving to a second-floor unit with no direct window access. The tapping stopped, but sometimes I still wake up at 2:30 a.m. on the dot without knowing why. Last night was different. When I walked to my kitchen to get a glass of water, I saw something on the hallway floor. A faint line of wet footprints leading from my front door toward my bedroom. Bare, human, adult-sized. I checked the door. It was still locked, but somehow I felt it. He'd gotten inside. And now I don't know what he wants. I just know he found me again. I can hear him right now, behind me in the dark. He's whispering, "Let me in." Story the end.
Story number 6.
My name is Daniel Mercer, and I'm 34 years old. I'm recording this because I don't trust myself to sleep anymore, not after what happened at Rook Pine RV campground last fall. People can call it stress, exhaustion, or hallucinations if they want. I used to call it that too. But what happened out there was real. And if you're hearing this, I need you to believe me before that place finds someone else. It started as a simple solo trip to clear my head. My job in Boise had been draining the life out of me, and my girlfriend and I had just split after 6 years. So I loaded up my old Winnebago, threw in a cooler, a rifle, some fishing gear, and headed toward northern Idaho. I'd heard Rook Pine RV Camp was quiet, remote, and cheap, exactly what I thought I needed. The road leading to the campground wound through miles of towering pines. I remember thinking the place smelled strongly of sap and wet dirt. I'd been to plenty of RV sites before, but something about the silence felt intentional, like the trees themselves were waiting. When I pulled into the campground, the office looked abandoned. The paint was peeling, and the sign hung crooked as if someone had tried to rip it down. I rang the little bell on the counter and waited. Almost a full minute later, an old man stepped out from a back room. His clothes looked like they'd been slept in for a week. "You staying long?" He asked without even looking at me. "Just a few nights," I said. "Site with hookups if possible." He slid a key across the counter. "Lot 12, stay on the paths. Don't wander at night." I thought he was joking, until he grabbed my wrist before I could leave. "And whatever you hear," he whispered, "don't answer." I laughed it off nervously, paid him, and left the building. But his words sank into my skin like cold water. Lot 12 was tucked near the back of the campground, close to the woods. I parked, hooked everything up, cooked dinner, and tried to relax. But from the moment the sun dipped behind the tree line, I started feeling watched. Not by people, by the woods themselves. Around 10, I heard the first sound. Someone knocked on my RV door. Not hard, not aggressive, just patient. 3 taps. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the place seemed almost empty when I drove in. I peeked out the window, but didn't see anyone. I flipped on the porch light. Nothing. I chalked it up to maybe the old man checking in on me, strange as that was. I went to bed around midnight. I remember the temperature dropped quickly, making the metal of the RV creak. I must have dozed off because the next thing I heard was the same knocking. But this time, it was at the back of the RV. 3 taps, slow, rhythmic. I grabbed my flashlight and checked the windows again. Still nothing. My nerves started doing somersaults. I locked all the doors, shut every curtain, and tried to convince myself I wasn't hearing what I was hearing. The knocking didn't come again that night. Instead, around 3 a.m., I heard whispering. A woman's whisper. Right outside my bedroom window. "Can you help me, please?" Her voice was thin and trembling, like she'd been crying for hours. I wanted to help. I really did. I even opened my mouth to answer her. But the old man's warning shot through my head so violently that it felt like someone slapped me. "Don't answer." I stayed silent, my heart thudding so loud I thought she might hear it. Her whispering grew more frantic. "Please, let me in. I'm cold. Please help, help." But something was off. Her voice didn't rise and fall like a normal person's. It scratched, like it was trying to mimic human emotion, but couldn't quite get it right. I waited until dawn before moving. When I finally stepped outside, expecting to find footprints, there weren't any. Despite the ground being soft from last night's rain, the dirt around the RV was untouched. That morning, I went to talk to the old man at the office. When I walked in, he looked at me like he already knew. "Did you talk to her?" he asked. "No," I said. "But I heard something. Someone." "What is it?" He swallowed hard. "You don't want to know, son. Rook Pine isn't like other places. People go missing here. They always have. Some come back, some don't. What walks these woods ain't living. I waited for him to laugh, to say he was messing with me. He never did. I asked him why he still worked there if he knew the place was dangerous. Someone's got to warn folks like you. Most don't listen. That should have been my sign to leave right then. But I'd paid for 3 nights and I was stubborn. I figured maybe the guy was just spinning local campfire tales. That evening, the woods felt heavier, like fog had settled even though the air was clear. I kept hearing branches snapping in the tree line. Not squirrels, not wind, something bigger, something circling. I made dinner and tried to distract myself with a movie, but around 9:30 my RV started to shake. At first, I thought it was an earthquake, but only the back end was moving. Then came the sound of fingernails dragging across the metal siding. Long, slow scratches running from the back window to the door. I turned off every light and crouched near the floor. Whatever was outside moved with slow, deliberate steps. Then a soft voice drifted through the metal wall, clearer than before. "Daniel, let me in. I'm hurt." My blood turned to ice. I had never told anyone my name there. Not the old man. Not anyone. "Daniel, please." The voice turned deeper, like 2 voices speaking at once. It scraped like gravel, twisting itself into a parody of suffering. It pounded on the door, then the walls, then the windows. I grabbed my rifle and held it tight, even though I knew bullets wouldn't help. The pounding lasted maybe 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. When it finally stopped, I sat frozen until the sun started to rise. I decided I was leaving. I didn't care if it was 6 a.m., didn't care if I lost money, didn't care if the old man thought I was crazy. When I went to disconnect the hookups, something made me look toward the tree line. There was a woman standing there, far back, half hidden between 2 thick pines. Her clothes were dirty and torn like she'd been wandering for days. Her head was bowed, hair covering her face. But what made my stomach drop was her posture. She wasn't standing. Her feet weren't touching the ground. She floated there, completely still, like she'd been pinned in place by invisible hooks. Then her head snapped upward. Her face was gray, no, drained, like a photograph left in the sun. Her eyes were huge and dark with no whites, just endless black. And her mouth, it looked sewn shut. But the threads were tearing slowly, like she'd been pulling at them from the inside. I stumbled backward, tripped over the water hose, and scrambled toward the RV door. When I looked again, she was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just gone. I tore out of that campground so fast my tires spit up rocks. But the weirdest part? As I passed the office, the old man was standing outside. He didn't wave. He didn't yell. He just watched me drive away with a look of pity so deep it felt like a warning. I thought the ordeal was over. I was wrong. That night, when I reached a different campground 2 hours south, I finally relaxed enough to breathe. I parked, ate a sandwich, and collapsed onto the bed. Around midnight, just when I felt myself drifting to sleep, something tapped on the RV window. 3 taps. Slow. Patient. My heart stopped. I forced myself to look outside. And there she was, floating at the edge of the campsite, half hidden behind an oak tree. Her head cocked unnaturally to the side. And even though her mouth was still torn and sewn and wrong, I heard her voice as clear as if she were whispering directly into my ear. "Daniel, you left too soon." I drove through the night, didn't stop until the next morning when I reached a busy truck stop. I slept inside the diner with other people around me just to feel safe. It's been months since then, and I still hear things some nights. Tapping on my apartment window even though I live on the 3rd floor. Whispering from the hallway when I'm alone. I keep telling myself it's trauma, imagination, nightmares. But last night, as I walked past the mirror in my bathroom, I swear I saw someone standing behind me, a woman, floating, smiling with torn threads hanging from her lips. I don't know how to stop her. I don't know what she wants. But I'm begging you, if you ever find yourself near Rook Pine RV Campground, turn around, leave, don't look back. And whatever you hear out there, don't answer. Story the end.
Story number 7.
My name is Daniel Hargrove, and I'm 38 years old. I never wanted to repeat this story, not to anyone. I thought if I buried it deep enough, if I tried hard enough to forget, it would lose its grip on me. But the truth is, it hasn't loosened at all. Not in 10 years. Not for a single night. If you're listening to this, then maybe you're like I was, curious about roadside legends, RV camp ghost stories, the stuff people swap around the fire for cheap thrills. I used to roll my eyes at all of it. I thought the scariest part of RV life was a busted generator or a flat tire somewhere past cell service. But there are things in the woods, American woods, our woods, that don't want to be found. Things older than any campground sign or ranger station. Things that are not supposed to be real. I learned all that at a place called Smoky Ridge RV Camp, and I barely made it out alive. I was driving cross-country for a construction job back in 2014. It was early October, the kind of weather where the nights get sharp and the mornings smell like pine and frost. I'd bought a used RV, nothing special. Brown stripe down the sides, squeaky door, bed barely big enough for someone my height. But it ran, and for a guy traveling alone, that was good enough. That evening, after 8 straight hours behind the wheel, I pulled off into a small Montana town whose name I don't even remember now. The gas station attendant noticed how tired I looked and suggested I stay at Smoky Ridge, a quiet RV camp about 4 miles into the woods. Cheap rates. Full hookups. Real peaceful, he said. I wish he hadn't said that word. I pulled in around 10 p.m. The place was dark, darker than any campground I'd ever seen. The office was closed, but a small board said tide. Pick a spot and pay in the morning. There were maybe 3 other RVs scattered around, all dark inside. No sounds, no TV static or muffled conversations. Just silence, heavy as wet wool. I parked in spot number 17. I remember the number because the metal post was bent like something had hit it hard, and the reflective numbers were scratched nearly white. The air outside felt wrong, too still. Not even insects humming, no distant owl. Just a pressure, like the woods were holding their breath. I shook it off, climbed into bed, and fell asleep within minutes. I woke up to footsteps. Slow, crushing leaves. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Someone was circling my RV. I stared at the ceiling, my heart punching at my ribs. I told myself it was a deer, maybe an elk. Something normal. Then the footsteps stopped right outside my window. I didn't move, didn't breathe. A soft dragging sound rubbed along the metal wall of my RV, like fingertips, long ones. I swallowed hard. My throat clicked loud enough that I swore whoever or whatever was outside heard it. Then came the whisper, right at my window. A low, raspy voice. Daniel? My blood turned to ice. I sat up too fast and smacked my head on the cabinet. I hadn't told a soul my name since I'd arrived. There was no way anyone at this camp could have known it. I grabbed the small hunting knife I kept by the bed and crept to the window. The blinds were down, thin as paper. My fingers shook as I lifted a tiny corner to look outside. There was nothing there, just trees, pale moonlight, empty space. But the footsteps began again, this time moving toward the back of the RV. I backed away from the window, heart slamming, knife shaking in my hand. The footsteps circled, slow and deliberate, before stopping again at my door. The doorknob twitched, then turned. Metal clicked softly. Someone was trying to come in. I rushed forward and shoved the deadbolt hard. My breathing was so loud I thought it would give me away. The turning stopped. Silence. Then a tap on the door. 4 taps, slow, rhythmic, like knocking from someone who wasn't in any hurry at all. "Let me in," the voice whispered. I didn't answer. The tapping became scratching, long, dragging nails across the metal, screeching. The sound made bile crawl up my throat. Then, suddenly, it stopped. No footsteps, no breathing, no whispering. Just the empty, suffocating quiet. I stayed awake until sunrise, gripping that knife, every muscle in my body locked tight. When the sky finally turned pink, I threw open the door. No footprints, no scratches, nothing disturbed. For a moment, I thought maybe I had dreamed the whole thing. I told myself exhaustion can do weird things. I almost believed it, until I saw the message. Scratched into the dirt beside my RV in long, uneven lines. I see you. The letters were crooked and deep, like carved by nails longer than fingers. My stomach flipped. I packed up fast, but before I could pull away, a tap hit my window. I jumped so hard I hit the brake. A man stood outside, middle-aged, uniformed. The park ranger. He motioned for me to roll down the window. His face was ashen, like he hadn't slept in days. "You were in spot 17, he said. It wasn't a question. Yeah. I tried to smile. It came out more like a grimace. "Look, someone messed with my RV last night. Was anyone?" "Listen carefully," he said, leaning in. "Don't stay another night. Don't ever come back here." I blinked at him. "Why? Look, what happened?" "Who was it?" The ranger opened his mouth, hesitated, then said, 17 shouldn't be rented out. Nobody should stay there." A cold draft crept into the RV. I swallowed hard. Why not? His voice dropped to a whisper. People who camp in 17 don't always leave. Before I could ask anything else, he stepped back, shook his head, and walked away like he didn't want to be seen talking to me. I didn't wait around. I drove out of there fast enough to kick gravel down the whole road. I hoped that was the end of it. But the thing from the woods followed me. It started small. Nightmares that felt too real. A shape standing at the foot of my bed. Whispered words I could never fully hear. Then the scratches appeared on the sides of the RV. Thin at first, then deeper. Jagged, carved with something strong enough to dent metal. One morning, I opened the door and found muddy footprints on the steps. Bare footprints. Long. Too long. That night, I stayed at a busy RV park with 30 other campers. I thought being surrounded by people would help, that whatever stalked me needed darkness and isolation. But at 3 a.m., I woke to my bedroom door slowly creeping open. Not the RV door, the bedroom door inside it. I froze. The air smelled like wet earth and rotting leaves, the kind of smell that doesn't belong indoors. My hand groped for the knife I kept under the pillow. A shadow shifted at the doorway. Tall, wrong, like a person stretched too thin. I whispered, "Who's there?" The shadow leaned in slightly, then whispered in the same voice from Smoky Ridge, "Daniel." I screamed and lunged forward, slamming the door shut with all my weight. I held it there, shaking, listening. No footsteps, no movement, just breathing. Right on the other side. Slow, wet, hungry. I held that door for what felt like forever before the breathing finally stopped. When I opened it seconds later, nothing was there, but the window was open. I never opened that window. I finally abandoned the RV in a Walmart parking lot in Colorado. I left the keys in it and walked away without looking back. I bought a used car off a guy who didn't ask questions. I told myself that leaving the RV behind would leave the thing behind. I was wrong. It came one last time. I was staying in a cheap roadside motel off Route 2. The kind with a buzzing neon sign and a manager who hands you the key without making eye contact. I tried to sleep, but the nightmares were too heavy. I kept seeing trees, long fingers, something crawling outside the RV door. Around midnight, I got up to splash water on my face. Something moved in the mirror behind me. I froze. Slowly, I lifted my head. In the mirror over my shoulder stood the shape from the RV campsite, tall, distorted, its head tilted unnaturally far to one side. But in the room itself, where it should have been standing, there was nothing. Its reflection was there, but the room was empty. The thing lifted a hand in the mirror. Something pressed onto my shoulder, cold, heavy, paralyzing. I gasped and spun around. Nothing. When I looked back at the mirror, the shape was closer. So close its face was inches from mine. Pale, hollow, eyes black and bottomless. It opened its mouth. No sound came out, but I heard it anyway. "I'm not finished with you." I stumbled backward, tripped over the corner of the bed, and scrambled for the door. I didn't take my bag, my phone, anything. I drove for hours until dawn broke across the plains, and only then did the weight in the air lift. I've never been back to Montana. I've never stayed in another RV. I moved into an apartment in a city where there are always people, always lights, always noise. I haven't camped once since that night. But sometimes when the room is dark enough and everything goes quiet, I swear I still hear it breathing. I know it's still out there. And it remembers my name. Story the end.
Story number 8.
From the RV campsite. Tall, distorted, its head tilted unnaturally far to one side. But in the room itself, where it should have been standing, there was nothing. Its reflection was there, but the room was empty. The thing lifted a hand in the mirror. Something pressed onto my shoulder. Cold, heavy, paralyzing. I gasped and spun around. Nothing. When I looked back at the mirror, the shape was closer. So close its face was inches from mine. Pale, hollow, eyes black and bottomless. It opened its mouth. No sound came out, but I heard it anyway. "I'm not finished with you." I stumbled backward, tripped over the corner of the bed, and scrambled for the door. I didn't take my bag, my phone, anything. I drove for hours until dawn broke across the plains, and only then did the weight in the air lift. I've never been back to Montana. I've never stayed in another RV. I moved into an apartment in a city where there are always people, always lights, always noise. I haven't camped once since that night. But sometimes when the room is dark enough and everything goes quiet, I swear I still hear it breathing. I know it's still out there. And it remembers my name. Story the end. From the RV campsite. tall, distorted, its head tilted unnaturally far to one side. But in the room itself, where it should have been standing, there was nothing. Its reflection was there, but the room was empty. The thing lifted a hand in the mirror. Something pressed onto my shoulder. Cold, heavy, paralyzing. I gasped and spun around. Nothing. When I looked back at the mirror, the shape was closer. So close its face was inches from mine. Pale, hollow, eyes black and bottomless. It opened its mouth. No sound came out, but I heard it anyway. I'm not finished with you. I stumbled backward, tripped over the corner of the bed, and scrambled for the door. I didn't take my bag, my phone, anything. I drove for hours until dawn broke across the plains, and only then did the weight in the air lift. I've never been back to Montana. I've never stayed in another RV. I moved into an apartment in a city where there are always people, always lights, always noise. I haven't camped once since that night. But sometimes when the room is dark enough and everything goes quiet, I swear I still hear it breathing. I know it's still out there. And it remembers my name. Story the end. From the RV campsite. Tall, distorted, its head tilted unnaturally far to one side. But in the room itself, where it should have been standing, there was nothing. Its reflection was there, but the room was empty. The thing lifted a hand in the mirror. Something pressed onto my shoulder. Cold, heavy, paralyzing. I gasped and spun around. Nothing. When I looked back at the mirror, the shape was closer. So close its face was inches from mine. Pale, hollow, eyes black and bottomless. It opened its mouth. No sound came out, but I heard it anyway. I'm not finished with you. I stumbled backward, tripped over the corner of the bed, and scrambled for the door. I didn't take my bag, my phone, anything. I drove for hours until dawn broke across the plains, and only then did the weight in the air lift. I've never been back to Montana. I've never stayed in another RV. I moved into an apartment in a city where there are always people, always lights, always noise. I haven't camped once since that night. But sometimes when the room is dark enough and everything goes quiet, I swear I still hear it breathing. I know it's still out there. And it remembers my name. Story the end. From the RV campsite. Tall, distorted, its head tilted unnaturally far to one side. But in the room itself, where it should have been standing, there was nothing. Its reflection was there, but the room was empty. The thing lifted a hand in the mirror. Something pressed onto my shoulder. Cold, heavy, paralyzing. I gasped and spun around. Nothing. When I looked back at the mirror, the shape was closer. So close its face was inches from mine. Pale, hollow, eyes black and bottomless. It opened its mouth. No sound came out, but I heard it anyway. I'm not finished with you. I stumbled backward, tripped over the corner of the bed, and scrambled for the door. I didn't take my bag, my phone, anything. I drove for hours until dawn broke across the plains, and only then did the weight in the air lift. I've never been back to Montana. I've never stayed in another RV. I moved into an apartment in a city where there are always people, always lights, always noise. I haven't camped once since that night. But sometimes when the room is dark enough and everything goes quiet, I swear I still hear it breathing. I know it's still out there. And it remembers my name. Story the end. From the RV campsite. Tall, distorted, its head tilted unnaturally far to one side. But in the room itself, where it should have been standing, there was nothing. Its reflection was there, but the room was empty. The thing lifted a hand in the mirror. Something pressed onto my shoulder. Cold, heavy, paralyzing. I gasped and spun around. Nothing. When I looked back at the mirror, the shape was closer. So close its face was inches from mine. Pale, hollow, eyes black and bottomless. It opened its mouth. No sound came out, but I heard it anyway. I'm not finished with you. I stumbled backward, tripped over the corner of the bed, and scrambled for the door. I didn't take my bag, my phone, anything. I drove for hours until dawn broke across the plains, and only then did the weight in the air lift. I've never been back to Montana. I've never stayed in another RV. I moved into an apartment in a city where there are always people, always lights, always noise. I haven't camped once since that night. But sometimes when the room is dark enough and everything goes quiet, I swear I still hear it breathing. I know it's still out there. And it remembers my name. Story the end. From the RV campsite. Tall, distorted, its head tilted unnaturally far to one side. But in the room itself, where it should have been standing, there was nothing. Its reflection was there, but the room was empty. The thing lifted a hand in the mirror. Something pressed onto my shoulder. Cold, heavy, paralyzing. I gasped and spun around. Nothing. When I looked back at the mirror, the shape was closer. So close its face was inches from mine. Pale, hollow, eyes black and bottomless. It opened its mouth. No sound came out, but I heard it anyway. I'm not finished with you. I stumbled backward, tripped over the corner of the bed, and scrambled for the door. I didn't take my bag, my phone, anything. I drove for hours until dawn broke across the plains, and only then did the weight in the air lift. I've never been back to Montana. I've never stayed in another RV. I moved into an apartment in a city where there are always people, always lights, always noise. I haven't camped once since that night. But sometimes when the room is dark enough and everything goes quiet, I swear I still hear it breathing. I know it's still out there. And it remembers my name. Story the end. From the RV campsite. Tall, distorted, its head tilted unnaturally far to one side. But in the room itself, where it should have been standing, there was nothing. Its reflection was there, but the room was empty. The thing lifted a hand in the mirror.